Welcome. I have with me Trevor Palmer, who is a Senior Property Account Executive at Pi Property Insurance. Our subject today is water damage in apartment blocks, specifically the insurance issues. Now, Trevor, I live in a ground floor flat. This morning I noticed water dripping through the ceiling from the flat above. And directly above is indeed the kitchen, and I would not be surprised the problem is with the flat owner's washing machine. I have heard that a claim can be made on the building insurance. Why is this, and what can I do?
Thanks, Nicholas. Water damage in apartment blocks is unfortunately very common. It is a huge issue. Recent bad winters have highlighted that issue, and it's been impacted on the insurance scene, impacted on premium rating and also excess levels. The reason why you would claim on the buildings insurance is if you have multiple occupants within a premises, obviously an apartment block, it makes sense to have the property insured as a whole. If you were to have various leaseholders all insuring their own properties, their own aspect of the building, it's a recipe for disaster. You could have the potential where people haven't insured correctly, forgotten to insure, haven't paid their premiums, and if something were to happen, such as example fire that causes severe damage, you might find that you end up on the first floor as opposed to being on the fourth floor because everybody else beneath you has failed to insure. So firstly, you have a block policy, and all leaseholders are policy holders of that block policy. So any damage to the buildings arising from an insured peril that's covered under the policy would form a claim under the building's policy. Water damage, obviously it throws up various potential issues because water is indiscriminate when it comes to what it's going to damage. You have the building's fabric, you have decorations, the electrics, the plumbing itself, floor coverings. Water can get everywhere. So potentially you could have a claim not just on your building's policy, but also on contents policy as well. With first discovering water damage, it's important to establish as to what is causing that damage, because a policy will have a condition that you have to mitigate a loss, which means that you have to take action to minimise the potential loss that is going to arise. It's not a case of just waiting for the insurance surveyor to come out and look at the damage, so locate the source of damage. Now, obviously that could be plumbing itself, it could be a pipe that has burst, it could be, in this instance, suspected washing machine. You may have outlets that haven't been correctly fitted to the waste pipes, and you can have water gushing out for several weeks or longer before it's noticed. So damp patches are normally the first sign. So in terms of action, the first thing to do is contact somebody that can locate that source of damage. Now obviously you're most likely going to have a property manager that looks after your block, and those will be the first people to contact. They will have maintenance people, plumbers that can come and look at that damage. It's important that remedial repairs are done to prevent it. If it's a burst pipe, yes, that pipe can be repaired to stop it leaking further. Now whilst that's going on, it's also important to adhere to any policy conditions in terms of reporting of claims. All policies vary. Some may have a time period, 30 days, some may have less, some may be as soon as reasonably practical that you report it. So the first thing to do, as well as locating the damage, is ensure that the appropriate, either the property manager, the committee on your block, or the insurance broker, if you know who they are contacted to inform them that there is going to be potentially a claim made on the policy. Now, insurance policies for buildings, for water damage, it doesn't cover wear, tear or gradual maintenance. Insurance policies are there to cover the unexpected. It doesn't cover anything that has occurred over a gradual period of time in terms of the actual maintenance. So confusion can arise as to, for example, with burst pipes. If the pipe has been damaged by accidental means or an insured peril, you've moved your furniture around, you've dropped it onto the floor, it's managed to dislodge a joint of a pipe, then that is covered if you have accidental damage cover under your policy. If the pipe has just worn away and it's developed a leak, the actual repairs to the pipe itself would not be covered by an insurance policy, but rest assured the subsequent damage is. So the policy will always pick up subsequent damage by water to the building's fabric, and obviously, as I've mentioned, it could well be that you need to involve a contents claim as well. So that's something to to look for and to know who to speak to. As with anything to do with insurance, it's all about communication. Because an insurance company, once they have been notified of a claim, depending on the cost, they may appoint a loss adjuster. Now, water damage claims can run into tens of thousands of pounds. As a property insurance specialist, we see claims week in, week out, and the simplest of damage can lead to substantial claims. We do see them regularly in the tens of thousands of pounds, because obviously blocks, by their very nature, the water will always find the quickest way down, and that can take up a lot of apartments and obviously fixtures and fittings. Any decorations that are damaged during the course of that water escaping will be picked up on the building's policy. From point of view where a loss adjuster is appointed, their job is to act on behalf of the insurance company to ensure that that claim is adjusted in line with the policy condition. So whilst loss adjusters are going to be helpful in regards to moving things forward, they are not acting on your behalf as the leaseholder, they are acting on behalf of the insurance company. Now, in most cases you will need to have an estimate. If it's going to be above a certain amount, most likely 2 estimates, but that would all be carried on after the water damage has been located and repaired. Now, I'm sure most people have heard of the term trace and access, because it's not always possible to know. I mean, in your circumstance, it might not be that washing machine. It could be something else that could indeed be from the floor above, and it's already worked its way past the floor above you and down to yourself. So most policies, and do check on the wording, will cover trace and access, which is basically allowing for reasonable cost to be incurred to locate the source of damage. And sometimes that can involve lifting up floorboards, having to trace pipework, and it can take some time to locate what has caused that damage. And obviously, until that's done, it's hard to actually rectify it to stop further damage arising. Now, policy should be one of reinstatement. Some policies aren't, but basically, most modern policies will cover you for the cost to reinstate and to repair as new. So you should not have a deduction for wear and tear, because your decorations and your fixtures may well be improved. If it is reinstated to the same basis or similar as new, then a policy should cover that to the full wording. That's assuming lots of conditions have been met, and also that the policy is adequately insured with regards to the sum for that building. And that's a subject in itself. But claims can be reduced by underinsurance if the insurance company believes that your sum insured for your building doesn't fully represent the reinstatement cost. And that is always an important point to assess at each renewal, certainly to inquire as to where the valuation arose, because the insurance companies deal on the cost to rebuild, not market value. So in terms of water damage, then you should expect, where your policy has been arranged on the correct basis and it has been kept up to date, that those repairs are addressed and electrics, where required, are repaired or replaced, and that your property is put back into a condition equal to as prior to the damage. Some aspects of that claim may well fall under a contents policy. Floor coverings. Some buildings policies will include certain extent of cover for floor coverings, but if you have a tenant, if you're a leaseholder that is sublet, you have a tenant in there, if that tenant has made improvements, it is most likely that the tenant will be responsible and should carry their own contents insurance. So that can be very much critical as to where the claim lies. We often get asked the question, well, okay, it's Mr. So-and-so's problem. He caused the damage. He had a new washing machine installed. He didn't correctly put that waste pipe in. So he's liable, and we want the insurance company to reclaim from him. Now, if that chap that lives upstairs, if he's a leaseholder, the insurance company will not seek recovery, because he is in effect a policyholder. All leaseholders are joint policyholders of a building's policy. They all pay the premium, they all have an interest in that property. So unless there is gross intent or malicious damage or criminal damage, an insurance company would not then seek to recover the cost. Now, because that's the case, that claim becomes part of the overall claims experience, and your future premiums and your future policy terms will be based on your claims experience. If the occupant of that property was a tenant and not the leaseholder, then that is a different situation. There may well be that a claim cost is subrogated against that occupant, and that occupant may well have their own contents insurance, and if they are deemed liable and they have liability insurance included within that contents insurance, which most do, then that is an opportunity where there may be a claim recoverable. So each matter is different, and the question of subrogation is also dependent upon the circumstance and who the occupant is. The downside, where you have a frequency of claims, a high frequency of claims and costs, is that that impacts on your future insurance premium. We see many cases that come to us for assistance and advice where they have high policy excesses. Some policies will automatically carry a £500 excess for water damage. So that is an element of the claim that cannot be recovered. And now that has to be recovered from somewhere, and obviously service charge. And so the pressure goes on to the service charge, both from the case of unrecoverable policy excesses and also from future increased premiums. So where we talk about water damage and you look at causes, then the answer is how can we reduce future frequencies? Risk management, what steps can be taken to improve our overall experience? Unfortunately, the residential block insurance isn't something that the insurance market is really actively seeking at the moment. There isn't a huge appetite for it. The reason being is that overall most insurance companies have made substantial losses. The premiums are far less than the claims that are being paid out. I know that most leaseholders will not necessarily realise that, but you may not know as to what claims have been paid out on your policy. You don't always know the final outcome, but it is rare for water damage claims to be less than several £1,000s, and it is common for them to exceed £50,000. So where you can take steps to minimise damage, always worth doing so, because you are protecting your future premium. You are protecting and taking the pressure off service charge, because if you can keep a low excess, or if you can get a no policy excess for water damage, and there are specialists, including ourselves, that can offer such cover, then that all takes pressure off service charge. The risk, and we do see this frequently, is that where you have apartment blocks that have had frequent and consistent issues, the risk is carrying a substantially high excess, and we can see them with £50,000 policy excess for water damage, or you may find that you cannot get cover at all. Now that can impact on the value of your property, because if you are looking to sell your apartment and a solicitor is inquiring as to the insurance details, and it comes to light that you either don't have any cover at all, the block isn't covered for water damage, or it has a policy excess running in tens of thousands of pounds, the interest and the appeal of that apartment to any potential buyer is going to be less, because they would not want to face those issues. And so our philosophy as a property specialist in terms of insurance is to look for prevention methods and look at how you can set your block aside from the rest of the market. So whenever water damage arises, obviously you want the claim paid. You want the repairs to be done. You want the insurance company to meet their part of the deal and pay for those costs. But it is a good opportunity to learn from what has caused that damage. And if it has been something like a poorly fitted waste pipe, or something not installed correctly, or, as is frequently the case, poor seals around baths and showers, then it is important to get those addressed. So maintenance becomes very much part of that risk management program. Your property manager will maintain the common areas, and it's important that you have a quality property manager that does do that job, and they are proactive. We deal with a lot of property managers, and we can see the correlation between claims frequency and proactive hands-on management is far less in general to those that aren't necessarily as active. So you need to have a good property manager from that point of view, but individual leaseholders have a responsibility for what they do in their own flats. There are areas that you can look to, including technology, to assist, because in particularly where you have certain apartments that are vacant for a period of time, and obviously depending on where you live, in particular London, a lot of them are used for various reasons and may be vacant. You can have technology that will fit equipment that can detect unexpected water flow, and it will automatically cut off water to that particular apartment. You will have a small seepage, but it would not be a continual issue that would go on and on and on. So it's always important to look at the different areas that you can cover. Because the consequences of water damage are quite far-reaching, for example, in more severe cases, you may have to move out of your apartment. and an insurance policy should cover you for alternative accommodation. Most policies do, but all policies are different, so it's something to be checked for. The important part of that is that a lot of standard policies will only cover alternative accommodation or loss of rent up to a percentage of the building sum insured, and in some cases that might only be 20%. Now, whilst rebuilding costs around the UK don't vary too significantly, rents do. And so if you are in a major city, particularly London, 20% might not be enough. So you need to be looking at values above 20% that will protect you adequately if you have to have alternative accommodation. And we've seen claims where that can be alternative accommodation for 2 years or longer, because if you have extensive damage to a large property, that's going to take a long time to rebuild. And always good if you are fortunate enough to live somewhere that allows pets. If you are looking for alternative accommodation, you might not be so lucky. So if your insurance policy includes alternative accommodation for your pets as well, that's going to save you an awful lot of money if you have to go through that process. So our philosophy is that, yes, risk prevention. We all rely on our insurance company to pay for our claims, but we have to look long term. The better claims experience that you have, the better options you have of competitive premiums and lower policy excesses. Water damage is very much the main cause of damage in apartment blocks, and so where you can take measures to prevent that, then those should certainly be looked at and be a discussion of those that are in the apartment block as to what action can be taken. There's lots of information available on the internet, particularly via specialist insurance brokers for property, that will be of assistance.
Okay, thanks very much, Trevor, and thanks very much, listeners, for listening to the podcast.
Thank you.